right, I got a few things I want to show you tonight. But before we do, because I'm going to tell you about if you ever wonder how Bay County got like $500 million in FEMA money after Hurricane Michael, and it doesn't look like it. Part of it is because there has been an unbelievable protection racket all the way to DC. There's a Florida congressman by the name of Jared Moskowitz, a Democrat. He's a complete weasel and scumbag. Today, he was listed as the least effective congressman, whatever. But there's a lot more about him that you need to know here in Bay County and how he was involved in preventing us from really recovering the way we should have recovered. All right. Look, the FBI knows about it. The DOJ knows about it. Are they going to do anything? Well, they might. It's a whole new DOJ, a whole new FBI. And you can tell by the way some people are acting, and they're acting. It's like a skit. Just like in Panama City, they do these skits. You can tell by the way they're acting that they're a little nervous. And I'll show you why. But first, I'll show you this. I did a couple of shorts today. I just want you to see what Josh Street. Look at this. This is the congressman.
So I'd like to.
Okay. This is the Panama City commissioner. People say, Bernie, he's not avoiding questions. He's answering questions publicly about Beach Drive. Just tell me this isn't scumbaggish. Tell me that this guy deserves to be reelected in April. All right. He was asked simple questions, and this is his answer to a resident in Panama City.
Record to reflect, since Mr. Pickens did, that I did try to go and talk to him after the last meeting, but he had left. I will offer the same thing today during our break. We can talk, and I'm more than happy to answer each and one of those questions, whether that's through a Facebook post, whether that's through an email, however you feel that that's appropriate, just not here. And so I'd like the record to reflect, since
just not here. All right. So I wanted you to see that. I'm going to show you some more from that page, from this page here, because I want to talk to you about something a little different. But I'm not going to answer questions at the meetings. You got to go on Facebook to listen. Panama City, in response to you and me and us, they are putting up frequently asked questions. They're doing all kinds of damage control. And I want you to know something. The way that resolution is written is so bad that, it's going to be hard to defeat it because of the language is so dishonest. But the fact that Panama City officials are spending so much time explaining things now, not where they're supposed to, but it's like a pretend to explain type thing. In politics, if you're explaining, you're losing. All right, you got that? In politics, if you are explaining, you're losing. Now, I don't know if that means the resolution will lose. If enough of you share the word that it's a fraudulent resolution, maybe. And if enough of you share the word that Josh Street won't answer questions, and they came up with a fraudulent referendum in order to try to shield him, maybe he will get defeated in April. I certainly hope so.
Wasteful spending. We can see examples of that with the Chestnut property deal that was just passed several weeks ago. Again, as Mayor Rohan had already mentioned, properties worth $800,000. We paid well over $1 million for it. It's just wasteful spending at the taxpayer's dime. In addition to that, I think improvement in transparency and community engagement is paramount.
Vote for Demetrius Reese for Panama City Commissioner, Ward 4, on or before April 22nd. A real conservative running against Josh Street. I certainly hope something comes of it. Now, also, Ed Young, if you want a big step in doing away with public corruption, I'm going to tell you some stuff tonight you're not going to believe. Then Ed Young is another one.
We have 3 city managers in Panama City. The first one, the chief one, makes $175,000 a year, and each assistant makes $125,000 a year, about $500,000 in one office alone. We have 714 employees in the city. We got 5 division heads. I've been in Air Force flight swings and commands. I've been in platoons in law enforcement. These numbers make no sense to me.
Vote for Ed Young for Panama City Commissioner, Ward 1, on or before April 22nd. Okay, what I want to tell you about is a congressman by the name of Jared Moskowitz. And I think what I'll do is I'll start the story in 2018. All right. Jared Moskowitz was a top executive. He was the top lawyer and business development guy for a national emergency contractor called Ashbrit. All right. Ashbrit. There were a couple of national companies that came here after the hurricane. And one of them conspired with the late Derwin White of GAC Contractors. And they inflated the prices to pick up hurricane debris, and they extended and prolonged the pickup so that they could cash out. Now, there was an FBI search warrant affidavit, much of the information from Sheriff Tommy Ford in their joint crackdown on public corruption. Ashbrit, this company, was being investigated by Sheriff Tommy Ford and by the FBI. In 2021, they told a judge that largely because of their schemes, that Bay County was more corrupt than New Jersey and New Orleans. And on, I think it was August 4 of 2021, they raided GAC Contractors and got a treasure trove of evidence of crimes and theft, having to do much of it with Ashbrit and GAC Contractors and many others that were named in the search warrant affidavit. Okay. So the company Ashbrit, one of their top execs was a guy named Jared Moskowitz. Jared Moskowitz left and became the head of the Florida Department of Emergency Management. He was overseeing FEMA disbursements in Bay County. This is in December of 2018. Now, at that very time, the real people who were robbing us blind in Bay County and Lynn Haven, they were talking among each other about how excited they were that Governor DeSantis appointed this crazy Democrat executive at Ashbrit to head up FEMA. Remember, Ashbrit gets FEMA money. Okay. So you've got now the fox guarding the hen house in Florida, and Governor DeSantis was in on it. It's the first thing he did when he got elected, when he defeated Gillum. And that's part of what you're seeing now with the pretend, let's be like Doge and make sure there's no fraudulent spending with Sheriff Tommy Ford. That whole game you saw last week is another indicator that they're a little bit worried about what might be found. Now you've got Congressman. Now he's a congressman, Jared Moskowitz. He is pushing hard, and I'll show you. FEMA falls under Homeland Security. Well, now that you've got people in Homeland Security who are looking for fraud, Congressman Jared Moskowitz he's doing all he can to say FEMA needs to get out of Homeland Security. Right? He doesn't want Homeland Security looking into FEMA. Let me show you a text message. As soon as Jared Moskowitz was appointed to be the head of emergency management in Florida in December of 2018 after Hurricane Michael, there were a couple of guys who were very excited about this, right? And these guys are Chris Forehand, the engineer in Lynn Haven, and also, by the way, the engineer that's gotten all the money in the Beach Drive stuff. He's still in the money. Chris Forehand and Lynn Haven city manager Michael White were texting back and forth how excited they were that their guy, Jared Moskowitz, the Ashbrit guy. Let me show you the text. This is from Mayor Margo Anderson's Twitter account, X account. You see that? So this is Chris Forehand, and he's texting Michael White. on December 7, 2018, just a couple of months after Hurricane Michael decimated Lynn Haven. And these guys are making companies and rubbing their hands together and getting corporate handbooks. And boy, are they excited. Moskowitz is officially the Florida DEM Director, Department of Emergency Management. Now, why is that a big deal? Oh, just because of several weeks before that, Derwin White had the Lynn Haven city attorney, Adam Albritton, send a fake justification letter for inflated prices for debris pickup to Ashbrit. And that was when they began conspiring to inflate prices and to prolong the debris pickup. So Chris Foran says Moskowitz is officially the Florida DEM director. He sends that to Michael White, and he says, guy, Ashbrit's guy. Ashbrit's guy. And Chris Foran's like, great. And this is great news. All right. So I wanted you to see that. Now, I have been, see if I can get to it here. I've been posting on X. If you don't follow me on X, really you should. So I reposted Mayor Anderson's post today. And she says, and as Jared Moskowitz positions himself on the FEMA committee in Congress, let us not forget text messages in the Panhandle after Hurricane Michael. Chris Forehand, who received immunity, says Moskowitz, appointed by DeSantis, is Ashbrit's guy. Yes, he was. He was their business director and lead lawyer. Ashbrit is named in the FBI affidavit that I just talked about. So I wrote, more than $500 million in FEMA money flowed through Bay County, Florida after Hurricane Michael. Congressman Jared Moskowitz and his friends had hands in the cookie jar. And I tagged FBI Director Kash Patel. Contact me for receipts, including 302s, affidavits, and more. I tagged the FBI and a few others. Dan Bongino, the assistant director of the FBI. And I also posted just a little while ago Mayor Margo Anderson's book that has much of this in it. Her best-selling book, Hurricane Michael, Storm of Corruption. And I wrote, Representative Moskowitz is trying to remove FEMA from Homeland Security because he had his hand in the cookie jar after Hurricane Michael. The FBI and the Justice Department knows this. He was a top Ashbrit executive, which was named in an indictment, and also more, but there's only so much you can put on a tweet. So that's on X. You're not following me on X, you're missing out. You really are. All right. So Ashbrit, again, is a national company that came here and was contracted and conspired with Derwin White, the late Derwin White, president of JC Contractors, to inflate prices and prolong debris pickup. Everybody knows this. Sheriff Tommy Ford was cracking down on public corruption. He knew all about it. I know that because I talked to his number 2 and number 3 all the time back then. And I was told that Derwin White had more than $15 million in kickbacks from Ashbrit. And that's also indicated in some of the investigation reports and stuff. Now, after Derwin White died of COVID unexpectedly at the age of 55 in late July of 2021, the sheriff's office said, oh, geez, there's no investigation left. I said, well, what about all the money? What about Ashbrit? And that's when we started going sideways. Because remember, it was the sheriff's office that was in a joint FBI investigation, and they gave much of the evidence that went to the FBI in that search warrant affidavit that said Bay County is more corrupt than New Jersey and New Orleans. But Sheriff Ford and the FBI couldn't find anybody other than the whistleblowers who they persecuted and failed to prosecute because it was 79 lies on top of each other. This is deep stuff. So whatever became of Ashprit? Well, I searched Ashprit and it said controversial national disaster relief hauler or something. That was like on their page. It was weird. But Ashprit, while they were under investigation, this is huge. 2020, 2021, while they're under investigation, more corrupt than New Jersey and New Orleans by Sheriff Ford and the FBI. They're making big donations in 2020 and 2021 to the Gulf Coast Children's Advocacy Center. They're robbing the county blind, and they're making big donations to the Gulf Coast Children's Advocacy Center, where Sheriff Tommy Ford was the treasurer. One of those donations in 2021, May 27, 2021, might have been March 27, was a $625,000 donation that on the very same day, $625,000 went straight to Derwin White and GAC contractors. And instead of being investigated, this is what they got. Right down in downtown Panama City, 303 Magnolia Avenue, they weren't investigated and charged, Ashprit. Instead, they are lauded by the Gulf Coast Children's Advocacy Center because of all of the big donations. Their name is featured. But there seem to be a lot of nervous people, to include Congressman Jared Moskowitz, who again was the Ashprit guy that was working with these people, Chris Forehand and them, overseeing FEMA money and how it's dispersed. And now he's a congressman. I don't know how much I can tell you about something because I don't want to blow covers. But I can assure you that the FBI and the DOJ know about this. They weren't going to do anything about it, but that was before some seats changed. And now that the seats have changed, you've got Jared Moskowitz freaking out and saying that we've got to get FEMA away from Homeland Security. Yeah, I bet he really wants to do that. I'm going to show you who this guy is, and I'm going to show you his website right after this.
When we partner with them, they will get the fund, they will get the slip rents, they will get everything probably for 60 years. So that is income that we in the city won't get. We'll still, either way we go, we're going to have a marina. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The question is who's going to get the funds from the marina. And if we have the funds ourselves, I think that then we could start reducing the fire tax.
Vote for Doc Rowan for Panama City Mayor on or before April 22nd. Don't let back pain and neck pain get you down. Find relief at Brown Chiropractic Center on St. Andrews Boulevard in Panama City. Dr. Sherry Brown helps people heal naturally with chiropractic adjustments and deep tissue massage. Call 769-3777. Now, if you want to know all about this, just get Margot Anderson's book. Mayor Anderson's book, best-selling book that came out last year, Hurricane Michael, Storm of Corruption. But there's one other thing you could do, and I might as well show it to you. I can't read it all, but okay. First, I told you I'd show you Jared Moskowitz, so let's get to that. Remember, he was the lead attorney and business development manager, top guy at Ashprit right before he was placed from Ashprit that got all the FEMA money to head up Florida's Department of Emergency Management. Let's take a look at his website if you want to know more about Jared Moskowitz, the scumbag congressman from Florida. This is him. About Jared. That's Jared. You see Jared? Let's get a bigger look at Jared. Everybody say, hi, Jared. Hi, scumbag Jared. God, he's awful. So this is his bio. I wonder if it's going to even mention Ashprit because of the controversy. Because everybody knows, not everybody knows, but Sheriff Ford knows. And the FBI and the DOJ, they know what Ashbrook did when they came here. And their former executive, who's now a congressman. Let's see. Here's this webpage about Jared. How can we help? They all talk like Josh Street, by the way, these people. Moskowitz answered the call of public service. All right, so he was a city commissioner like Josh Street. And in 2012, he was elected to the Florida legislature. Then he fought for gun control. And here we go. Let's see if it even mentions Ashbrook, because he always used to. So far, I don't see it. In 2019, it was actually December of 2018. Moskowitz was appointed by Governor DeSantis to be Florida's Director of Emergency Management. As director, he was responsible for disaster recovery efforts throughout the state. Most notably, the response to COVID-19. So he was a big COVID-19 and FEMA cookie jar kind of guy. And Hurricane Michael. See it there? A Cat 5 storm. He was involved in the vaccine rollout. Look, by the way, there's a big story there I haven't told you yet. It's unbelievable. Has to do with Bay County. So, wow, it doesn't say anything about Ashbrook on his bio. This is big deal. I did not read this before. I don't see Ashbrook on here. Do you? Most recently, he served as Broward County Commissioner. In his position, he worked to improve affordable housing, blah, blah, blah. He's a big crony guy. Big abortion guy. No, it doesn't say anything about his time at Ashbrook. I'm telling you, I can feel it. There's something going on. Uh-oh. Oh, I see. There's something going on with all of these things. There's a lot of FEMA money that was swindled. Okay. All right, let's do let me show you what I just posted on Substack. And this is the prologue that I wrote for Mayor Anderson's book. You can get it on Amazon. It is 600 pages. It's best-selling, unbelievable. Why is it so unbelievable? Because it has the receipts. When she and James Finch were persecuted, the prosecutors lied so bad about them that the federal judge, Mark Walker, did something he had never done before and something fewer than 1% of all federal defendants ever get. And that is the grand jury testimony unsealed. What did you tell the grand jury to get these two people indicted? And it turned out to be lie after lie after lie. So those were unsealed. And a lot of that information is in here, as well as the FBI investigation notes known as 302s. And the ones that Sheriff Ford's people didn't destroy, they destroyed a bunch of their investigation notes. And Judge Walker let them do that. I was told by Major Jimmy Stanford and Chief Deputy Joel Heap that Judge Walker, because he did that, he really just ruined their ongoing investigation to crack down on public corruption. That's when I kind of figured out something's not right around here. But this is what I just posted on Substack. And if you want to read the prologue, it is it's a big deal, and it's packed full of stuff. This is how you can get there, by the way. And you don't need to be subscribed to see this, but you do need to subscribe to get the weekly emails. This one is available for everybody to see. Bernie.substack.com. Will somebody please put that in the comment section? Or actually this very article I just wrote today, so people can find it. Will somebody do that for me, please? Let's take a look at what I've got here, and I'm going to do it this way. So I just posted this today. It's the prologue that's in the book. A prologue is a whole chapter. My prologue for Mayor Margo Anderson's book, Storm of Corruption After Hurricane Michael Decimated the City of Lynn Haven. How I went from thinking she was guilty of public corruption to knowing that all 64 counts were bogus. The DOJ's prosecution failed because she was the whistleblower. The guilty remain free. Bernie.substack.com. The book includes, and look what I've done here, where it says book, that's a hyperlink. Grand jury, these are hyperlinked, so you can see documents on this article. The book includes shocking documentation because federal judge Mark Walker ordered the release of the grand jury transcripts, FBI 302 investigation notes, and Bay County Sheriff investigation notes. All right, there's the book. And I'll just share with you a little bit of the forward, as long as I'm up for it, I guess, and as long as you're interested. I titled it Following the Evidence. I wrote it. Mayor Margo Anderson put it as the first chapter of her book. And I have a little quote there that I find very important for investigations, and that is from J.K. Rowling. There's nothing like looking if you want to find something. I thought she did it. Mayor Margo Anderson called me from home the night she was indicted on 64 counts of public corruption. All told, she was facing more than 1,000 years in prison. It took me off guard. And I really didn't want to take the call. We knew each other, and I liked her. She told me she was innocent, and I was the only member of the press she trusted. Her wrists and ankles were bruised from the shackles that bound her for several hours in a federal holding cell in Jacksonville. If Shell-Shocked had a voice, it was Margo Anderson's on August 19, 2020. I told her that I'd report the truth wherever it led me, and I told her I'd pray for justice. At the time, I thought I knew the truth. The FBI was working jointly with the Bay County Sheriff's Office, and I was good friends with Chief Deputy Joel Heap. That's the number 2. That's the undersheriff. Good friends. I thought, he's the boss of everybody at the sheriff's office, and he assured me that the evidence against Mayor Margo Anderson was overwhelming. Earlier that afternoon, I had attended the press conference at which federal prosecutors announced the charges against her. Along with the FBI and the sheriff, U.S. Attorney Larry Keefe promised to root out public corruption, widespread corruption, in their ongoing investigation. I had been reporting public corruption, mostly in Panama City Beach at the time. A week after Mayor Anderson was indicted, the city of PCB was issued a sweeping federal subpoena. I figured they were just getting started in Lynn Haven, and they were on their way to some bigger crooks masquerading as public servants. The dragnet was wide, I was told. My friend Joel kept saying that nobody had more integrity than Sheriff Ford. He said that even if the FBI didn't clean up local government, the sheriff and state attorney Larry Bassford would. I believed him, and I assured my audience that the hounds of justice were on the hunt. Bay County received more than $300 million in FEMA money. I think it's more than $500 million. After Hurricane Michael, it was the most powerful storm to hit the United States in 50 years. All that FEMA dough kept the cookie jar full, and the FBI and Sheriff Ford knew whose hands were in it most. Almost 11 months after Mayor Margo Anderson was arrested, the feds nabbed her longtime friend and wealthy developer, James Finch. The superseding indictment alleged that Finch and Mayor Anderson had engaged in an elaborate conspiracy to defraud the city of Lynn Haven and the federal government. I had never met Finch at the time, but I was told Margo would most likely take a plea deal and testify against her friend. That's what I was told. Otherwise, they said she'd surely spend the rest of her life in prison. She was 65 at the time. The FBI arrested Finch March 18, 2021, and I couldn't figure out why Derwin White hadn't been indicted yet. He was the president and co-owner of GAC Contractors, along with Alan Bentz, former Speaker of the Florida House. Everybody thought Derwin was the main target in the big crackdown of public corruption. GAC Contractors had teamed up with National Emergency Management Company Ashbridge. After Hurricane Michael, Derwin had allegedly received more than $15 million in kickbacks. I asked Major Stanford where that money went. Well, he died. Yeah, but where'd the money go? What about the source of the kickbacks? Well, it's spent, Bernie, and we got most of the tractors. Oh, okay. In 2020, the FBI had issued subpoenas to Bay District schools in Panama City Beach, demanding all communication associated with Derwin White. Local bigwigs who had their hands in the FEMA cookie jar began to avoid him. Major Stanford led the sheriff's investigation into public corruption, and he was third in command under Joel. He had been longtime friends with Derwin until an apparent falling out in late 2017. Not only was Derwin a big contractor, he fancied himself as a local political kingmaker. In 2019, people all over town had been getting visits from FBI Special Agent Larry Borghini and Major Stanford asking about Derwin and GAC Contractors. You remember that? Some of you say, yeah, I remember that really well. But by April 2021, the month after Finch was hit with conspiracy charges, public officials began to suspect that the high-profile investigation was fizzling out. Word on the street was that Derwin got his mojo back with all the attention on Finch and Margot. Sources told me that Derwin threatened to support rival candidates against Panama City Beach councilmen unless they promoted his buddy to police chief, and the police chief to city manager. It was a remarkable feat that Derwin pulled off, since they had to remove the educational requirements for Drew Whitman to manage City Hall. But now it appeared that Sheriff Ford and the feds were myopically obsessed with Margot and Finch, who had the money to fight the charges against both of them. His defense attorney, Guy Lewis, had been a federal prosecutor in South Florida until 2002, and then Finch's defense attorney, Guy Lewis, was appointed to oversee all U.S. attorneys under Attorney General John Ashcroft. Finch had called in the big guns, and Finch was fighting mad, saying that Margot blew the damn whistle on FEMA fraud 2 years prior when she notified Sheriff Ford in his office. Finch himself had stumbled across it by accident in March 2019 when he asked Mayor Anderson who built the new restroom at a city park. That's how she found the $5 million in fraudulent payments to erosion control specialists owned by Derwin's nephew, Mickey White. Before and after being indicted, Finch gave full access to news outlets. Rather than dodging questions, Finch even gave a 25-minute interview with WMBB. This time, federal prosecutors had a tiger by the tail. I link that interview. I link the interview in this article. You can see the whole 25-minute interview. And again, I hope somebody's linked posted this where you can read it. But here's how you can find it: bernie.substack.com. That is where this is. You don't need a subscription to read this right now. It's on Substack, bernie.substack.com. Highly recommend you get a weekly subscription for the weekly newsletter, though. But Joel and Major Stanford said Finch was full of it. They told me that prosecutors had Finch and Margot dead to rights. Just wait till the evidence comes out. Fast forward to late July 2021. Joel and Major Stanford were in my office, and we were talking about local corruption. Just before they left, they dropped a bombshell on me. Derwin was in ICU with COVID. He was 55 and in pretty good shape. And I was dumbfounded. Why did they wait to tell me until they were about to leave? 3 days later, I received a text from Major Stanford. Not sure if he heard, but Derwin just died from COVID. It was 2:51 p.m. on Saturday, July 31st. It was big news in the community as Derwin was well connected and a big donor to local nonprofits like the Gulf Coast Children's Advocacy Center. 5 days after Derwin died, FBI Special Agent Borghini and Major Stanford led an all-day search on GAC contractors. I was confident that they had seized a treasure trove of evidence that would finally implicate other local officials, but I couldn't help wondering why they were so quick to act only after Derwin had passed away. Margot issues me a challenge. I began looking more closely into the case in March 2021 after Finch was arrested. Prosecutors tied Margot to Finch in the superseding indictment that alleged the two had been conspiring to defraud the city all along. The drumbeat from local news outlets seemed in lockstep with the federal prosecutors. The grifts and the bribes and the graft, all of that stuff. Bonnie and Clyde of Lynn Haven had finally been stopped by Sheriff Ford and the FBI. It had been almost a year since Mayor Anderson was first indicted in August of 2020 and removed by Governor Ron DeSantis. The case had dragged on because of the COVID lockdowns and the superseding indictment that brought Finch into the mix. I was frustrated that more local officials still hadn't been indicted. Be patient. Be patient, Joel said. The feds move slowly, but Sheriff Ford is committed and you can count on him. Their gooses are cooked one way or another. I was eager for the other shoe to drop on more local and state officials. Summer 2021 was quickly approaching, and I was hopeful for accountability beyond Lynn Haven. Public officials were jumping every time their phone rang, and there were lots of indicators that a reckoning was right around the corner. That's when I received an earnest Facebook message from Margot Anderson, bursting with heartfelt sincerity and insistence. That's it. I posted it on there. That's what she sent me. May 12, 2021, a couple months after James Finch had been indicted. She said to me, off the record, if you're still the person I've always believed you to be, if you are truly searching for the truth, I want you to know that I would continue to loudly proclaim my innocence of any wrongdoing more than I do now, if I could also present my evidence in the public forum, evidence which will be surprising to many. But to do that before trial is exactly what this corrupt prosecution hopes that I will do. What surprises me most about you, Bernie, is that you are usually very thorough in your investigative and research processes and connecting the dots. You didn't dig deep enough on this one into local law enforcement leaders and local FBI to find out why this happened to me. Why do you distrust or question the motives and actions of so many elected officials at all levels, but you trust elected law enforcement and a police chief who secretly, that's Ricky Ramey, who secretly recorded every conversation he had with the sitting mayor of Lynn Haven for over 6 months? Why would he do that? Did he make a deal? By the way, there's nothing incriminating to me in what he recorded. Probably the same reason I've always trusted and respected law enforcement. I love our country and never dreamed the people we should trust most could also be so corrupt. What was presented to the grand jury who presented it, and more importantly, what was not presented, has been overlooked. I look forward to my day in court when I'm no longer silenced. Silence is a terrible thing when you are innocent and know the truth. Tom Lewis and Brady Calhoun have told their story thanks to Arthur Cullen, Dan Russell, and others who wanted me gone. Wait until I can finally tell mine. They have the public convinced that just because the government alleged something, it is true. Best wishes always, Bernie. You are wrong about me, and I look forward to the day when I am vindicated by the truth. I hope you will cover that story. How's that? I get that from her after my buddies at the sheriff's office are telling me her goose is cooked. I first met Margot in 2008 when she performed her sublime Patsy Cline tribute on the Betsy Ann Riverboat in Panama City. That was 7 years before she became the mayor of Lynn Haven. When she was elected in 2015, I was thrilled. She became the most popular mayor in Bay County, especially in late 2018 during the aftermath of Hurricane Michael. But Margot's Facebook challenge that I just read you, it moved me. Usually co-conspirators aren't eager to answer questions, with federal prosecutors boasting a 98% conviction rate for each count. And I kept replaying her words in my head. If you are truly searching for the truth, you're usually very thorough. You didn't dig deep enough on this one. You're wrong about me. I hope you'll cover the story. Well, the case against them had lots of moving parts in the maze of allegations, and it would take time to focus to understand it all. I'd have to pull my attention away from other stories I was chasing down. And until now, my plan was to cram right before her trial as though it were a college exam. After all, I still mostly trusted what Joel and Major Stanford had told me about all that evidence against him. But I couldn't fall asleep that night, so after midnight, I replied to Margot's message. I said, thank you for sending this to me. I'm always open to the truth. I believe that, and I did believe, you're targeted for exactly the reasons you described. I believe that Arthur Cullen and his handlers were determined to destroy you. And they had very powerful backers who felt threatened by you. I never go to sleep upset about what you or James Finch did or didn't do. There are so many mean or braggadocious people who have my attention right now. All that said, you've always been so kind to me. I'm happy to talk with you anytime, and I'll always let the evidence lead me to my conclusions. If you are ever in a position to join me on the show, I'll treat you well and would never ambush you. The questions and tone would be tough, but fair. I'd tell anyone that we have always been mutual fans, so to speak. The word fan seems so pretentious to me. You have some high hurdles, and I pray that you get a fair outcome. But fairness was off the table, as I would later discover that prosecutors were hiding exculpatory evidence that would prove the case was negligent at best or malicious at worst. Prosecutors faced a stunning plot twist in February 2022 after Margot and Finch showed factual errors and legal deficiencies in their earlier indictments. Federal Judge Mark Walker directed prosecutors to hand over the grand jury transcripts. This virtually never happens. It was the first time Judge Walker had ever revealed what the FBI and federal prosecutors had told a grand jury in order to secure an indictment. The judge also ordered prosecutors to include all investigation reports by the FBI and the sheriff's office. All of that would remain sealed from the public for about a year. The defendants received investigation notes that were heavily redacted. Prosecutors said they would decide what Finch and Margot were allowed to see. But Judge Walker disagreed, and most of the redactions were lifted. What the defendants saw put the investigators and prosecutors on their heels. Finch's attorney, Guy Lewis, filed a motion to dismiss all of the conspiracy charges against his client and Margot. Federal judges are required to lean heavily toward the prosecution, and they don't want to be overturned later by a higher court. Dismissing an indictment requires prosecutorial misconduct that shocks the conscience. Before issuing a ruling, Judge Walker held an evidentiary hearing with witnesses and testimony about a month later on March 31st, 2022, and it was a barn burner. It was an absolute barn burner. I'm going to tell you what the grand jury was told. I'll tell you what the grand jury was told right after this.
Hand caught in the cookie jar? Sometimes bad habits continue even into adulthood. I'm El Saline, 850-215-0628. Let me help you.
You want to look good? You want to feel good? Little John's Big and Tall is where it's at. Right across the street from Sky's Pizza Pie, 5700 North Davis Highway. You can find out more online at littlejohnsbigandtall.com. He's also a member of the iTex trading community. where your iTex dollars are welcome.
Again, this is where you can find what I'm reading to you. I posted it today on Substack, bernie.substack.com. It has links. You can see a lot of the stuff that I've linked to this, but this is what I'm reading from bernie.substack.com. All right, here's what the grand jury was told. Fewer than 1% of federal defendants ever find this out. Assistant U.S. Attorney Stephen Coons, the lead prosecutor, and Special Agent Borghini made the following allegations to the grand jury. This is what got them indicted. They told the grand jury that Mayor Anderson directed the city to clear hurricane debris from her property. She was in Key West floating on Finch's yacht a couple weeks after the Cat 5 storm leveled their hometown. They said she was in Key West floating on a yacht a couple weeks after. They said she ripped off the city by using its insurance adjuster for her own home. They told the grand jury that she gave contracts worth millions to Finch in exchange for lavish gifts, such as a motorhome. They told the grand jury that Finch bribed Mayor Anderson and other city commissioners for big contracts, and that they both made false statements to the FBI. Well, the grand jury said, hell, here's the indictment. But none of those accusations were true. In fact, they were brazenly false. I'm going to go over them in order. Other city officials actually did have hurricane debris removed from their property immediately following the storm. A month later, the city cleared the public easement next to Margot's home. Her family and friends had cleaned her property a few days after the hurricane. Number two, Margot could not have been on Finch's yacht because he was recovering from a stroke in Jacksonville in a hospital at the time. And besides, he had sold his yacht prior to Hurricane Michael. Let that sink in. Margot paid the public adjuster for service. She paid the public adjuster. Unlike City Commissioner Dan Russell, who did not, and subsequently received $75,000 from his insurance company. And the feds named Russell in the indictment, but he was never charged. Instead, he became the acting mayor. The city commission had voted unanimously for every contract Finch ever won. Mayor Anderson never cast the deciding vote, and state statute required her to cast a vote. The city manager and staff always recommended Finch as the low bidder, with decades of stellar projects under his belt. And sometimes Finch even funded the projects himself. As for the motorhome, turns out Margot's husband had paid for it after all. The feds gave it back after parking it in a field under the sun for 3 years. Number five, a bribe requires quid pro quo, which did not happen. So prosecutors charged Finch with giving a gratuity, which required no evidence. Only a wink and a nod. Less than a year after the jury returned a not guilty verdict in October 2023, the United States Supreme Court issued an opinion prohibiting the catch-all charge that they leveled against Finch. Federal prosecutors aren't allowed to charge anybody without evidence anymore, but they were then. Number six, feds love to use false statements as their final go-to charge when all else fails. They call it their darling. Margot pled guilty to this charge and served a month in prison after prosecutors threatened to indict her again if she was found not guilty. You know, there's an old saying that no good deed goes unpunished, and that proved true for James Finch. In 2015, the city did not have enough money to fix Lynn Haven's most dangerous road that ran alongside a deep ravine. The city manager and commissioners wanted to fix it immediately. Engineers said they could do it for $7.5 million. But Finch said he could do it for $5.2 million, and he won the bid. The city borrowed the money from Finch at half the going interest rate. And he told the city, don't even start paying me back until the project's finished. When he finished the project, it was only $4.4 million. He was under budget. So what do you think the city did? He already said he'd loan him 5.2. They wanted the difference. City commissioners publicly thanked Finch and then asked him to borrow another $790,000 to fix stormwater problems. Over by Vicki Gaynor's house she was building, by the way. Finch obliged, of course, after yet another unanimous vote. He even extended the last payment of the loan until he turns 95. Think about the absurdity of charging Finch with a crime for fixing the 17th Street ditch. They accused him of conspiring with Margot to steal his own money after completing the city's most needed road project. Prior to being indicted in March 2021, Finch suspected the sheriff and FBI were out to get him because he was paying Margot's defense attorneys. Derwin White was also worried about being indicted, so the two biggest local contractors began putting together a joint legal strategy. By this time, both had legal representation that prohibited investigators from making contact with them directly. But that didn't stop Special Agent Borghini, who had an informant in Derwin's office. But on the witness stand, though, Special Agent Borghini told Judge Walker that the informant was not an informant at all. The special agent insisted that he never directed the individual to do anything, especially regarding Derwin's hard drive that was labeled attorney-client privilege. A few days later, the informant submitted a sworn affidavit with screenshots of text messages from the special agent asking about Derwin's hard drive. And Judge Walker didn't do shit about it. So now it's got my interest, right? Now I'm covering the case. When the evidentiary hearing ended April 6, 2022, I was convinced that Joel and Major Stanford had misled me about Margot and James. I couldn't believe what I had seen in the courtroom. And I was stunned at how deceitful the prosecutors and investigators were right to Judge Walker's face. I couldn't imagine Sheriff Ford or the FBI wanting it to go to trial at this point. Not after what I'd seen in the courtroom. And 3 weeks later, I finally got the courage to make the following post. The charges against this is April 28, 2022. And this was when, this is the beginning of me being targeted by the sheriff's office to surround my home a few months later. The charges against Margot Anderson, I said, and James Finch appear to be the result of malicious prosecution. Don't be surprised if Judge Mark Walker completely dismisses the charges in late May or early June. And don't be shocked if Judge Mark Walker holds law enforcement and or prosecutors accountable before this is all over. I was shocked to see the evidence and hear live testimony when I attended the evidentiary hearings 3 weeks ago. I don't believe the prosecutors want the case to go in front of a jury at this point. I think the FBI, Sheriff's Office, and U.S. Attorney's Office would rather the judge throw it out. The last thing they want to do is take the stand and explain their false statements to the grand jury or the gifts the Bay County Sheriff's investigator received from the main contractor under investigation. The prosecutors wouldn't even refute the defense in front of Judge Walker to conclude the evidentiary hearing. When asked, they simply said, "No, Your Honor, we'll submit it in writing." Even WMBB, the main propagandist in the case, softening their accusatory stories, they see the writing on the wall. No doubt there was major fraud in Lynn Haven. Those who did it have pleaded guilty already, and a couple others remain free. Most notably, city engineer Chris Forehand. It seems he has friends in the right places. If this turns out to be malicious prosecution, I'll tell you why and how it happened. I only stumbled across the reason a few weeks ago. Absolutely nobody knew the missing piece of this puzzle, and it's a shocker. Sheriff's Office becomes furious with me. In early May 2022, Joel and Major Stanford came to my office, and they tried to convince me that I was wrong about James and Margot. They were livid that Judge Walker had released the grand jury transcripts and investigation notes. Major Stanford told me how Derwin went from being his best friend to his enemy in late 2017. I questioned the integrity of the entire public corruption investigation. And after nearly 2 hours, Joel and Major Stanford became angry and they stormed out. That's the last I really heard from them, basically. During the evidentiary hearing a month earlier, Major Stanford admitted that Derwin had given him a Harley Davidson when they were friends sometime around 2011. But Major Stanford denied receiving a truck, a down payment for his house, a swimming pool, and that Derwin had paid for his sister's funeral. A few days later, after testifying to the judge, he corrected the record. Derwin had paid for some of the funeral expenses. A few weeks, though, before, this is so crazy. A few weeks before Major Stanford's testimony in front of Judge Walker, well, the FBI finally questioned him about it. His answers were entered into a Form 302 investigation memo. There it is. And here's what the FBI investigation memo says about Major Stanford, who was heading up the public corruption investigation for the sheriff's office. It says, Stanford was aware of some of the allegations going around regarding things that White did for Stanford. White never paid for Stanford's pool and never gave Stanford the down payment for any house. White did not pay the expenses for Stanford's sister's funeral, as Stanford paid for those expenses with his personal credit card. That turned out to be not entirely true. White never gave Stanford $10,000, and Stanford never took a dollar from White. Stanford, remember, this is the FBI agent who was working with Stanford on the public corruption. They're doing this together as though it's an investigation into Stanford. But they did go to the casino a few times. But Stanford always used his own money. Stanford and White were very close for a few years, but Stanford never felt like he crossed any lines. Further, White never asked Stanford to take any official action to benefit anybody. Well, the memo reads like a preemptive narrative rather than an investigation memo. Clearly, Major Stanford made a false statement to the FBI, whether intentional or not. That's exactly what they prosecuted Margot for after dropping all 64 charges. The night before Mayor Anderson was indicted, she told the FBI that she first met Derwin's nephew in December 2018 rather than October 2018. And for that, Judge Walker sent her to prison for a month and put her on probation for a year. Major Stanford was also questioned about fake invoices that Derwin planted at ECS to frame Mayor Anderson. Derwin and his nephew Mickey placed them in his office the night before Sheriff Ford's morning raid. They framed her the night before. How did Derwin know? This was less than 2 weeks after Margot blew the whistle on Derwin's nephew. Mickey testified that Derwin knew it was coming. Mayor Anderson's defense attorney, Robert Vizina, had Major Stanford on the witness stand in front of Judge Walker. And the attorney asked Major Stanford, how did you get the fake invoices if you weren't present during the raid? How did they get in your possession? That's from the transcript. And Major Stanford said very eloquently, it never got in my possession, but it went from a couple of the people around there and it got back to the sheriff's office. I don't know how hard to the government anyway. I don't remember exactly how that came about. That was Major Stanford's testimony about that. Now, the prosecution against Finch and Margot took a hit, even when her motion to dismiss was denied on July 8, 2022. Judge Walker was fed up with them filing new indictments every time faulty charges were thrown out. Multiple bites at the apple were spoiling the entire case. And here's what Judge Walker wrote in his ruling. Though this court declines to dismiss the second superseding indictment, none should mistake this order as an endorsement of the government's conduct. The government's reckless, haphazard approach is testing this court's patience. More importantly, it is approaching a threshold beyond which defendants are so prejudiced by the government's conduct that the court will have no choice but to dismiss the indictment. That's how close it was. After this scathing rebuke by Judge Walker, my coverage of the case began to reflect my indignation that Margot and Finch were being persecuted. And I made the following Facebook post the same day the ruling was filed, July 8, 2022. Federal judge rebukes the government as reckless and haphazard in its investigation and prosecution of former Lynn Haven mayor and developer. Judge Mark Walker issued a stern rebuke to the investigators and prosecutors in the Lynn Haven corruption case against Anderson and Finch. The judge's latest order that denied dismissal of the entire case was just unsealed. It shows that while he threw out count one, the conspiracy, in a separate order, dismissing the entire case would be an extraordinary measure, but it appears to have been a close call. The crux of the decision centers around one, the government's numerous false statements to the grand jury in order to obtain indictments in the first place, and two, Sixth Amendment violations concerning infiltrating attorney-client privilege. Others, including City Attorney Adam Albritton and City Manager Michael White, have already pleaded guilty and await sentencing. More to follow. Well, what followed was a second evidentiary hearing in December of 2022 that was even more revealing. On the witness stand, there were a cast of shady characters who had orchestrated the entire setup. Police Chief Ricky Ramey was flippant on the witness stand in front of the judge. City Manager Vicky Gaynor was sanctimonious. And City Manager Michael White, awaiting his own prison sentence, was bizarre. Their accusations against Margot and Finch were demonstrably false, cringy, and often differed from their earlier statements to the FBI, but prosecutors didn't mind false statements as long as they were on script in this saga of corruption wrapped in corruption. But something unexpected happened before the second evidentiary hearing that took place in December 2022. The Panama City News-Herald broke a major story about the case on August 11th, 2022. It confirmed that the FBI and Sheriff Ford had been investigating public corruption by elected officials and contractors whose names were not Margot Anderson and James Finch. A document surfaced, and I linked the document, bernie.substack.com. It was the FBI search warrant affidavit filed by Special Agent Borghini on August 3rd, 2021, before they raided GAC contractors. That might have been filed on August 1st. I might have got that date wrong. He accused several elected officials and contractors of criminal activity in the 45-page document. The search warrant affidavit implicated State Senator George Gaynor and School Superintendent Bill Husfeldt by name. Even so, Sheriff Ford had endorsed Husfeldt for a successful reelection shortly before the document was revealed. The very next day, Mayor Anderson was indicted. The very next day after Husfeldt was successfully reelected, and Bassford as well, state attorney. That's when she was indicted, August 20, 2020 rather. The sheriff and FBI humiliated her husband in front of local news cameras as they seized his motorhome. Margot was arrested at their Jacksonville home and shackled for hours in a federal holding cell until the afternoon press conference announced the 64 counts against her. But this newly unsealed document told a different story entirely. The News Herald's lead paragraph shocked the community. Quote, this is from the News Herald now. GAC Contractors, a local company whose top executives include former Speaker of the House Alan Bentz, bilked millions of dollars from local governments in 2018 when it was contracted to clean up debris caused by Hurricane Michael, end quote. This is important. This right here. This goes to the title of the show. Sheriff Ford and the FBI knew that in late 2018, Derwin White had conspired with Ashbrit, the company, to overcharge the county and its municipalities for debris cleanup after the storm. They knew it while they were scheming to defraud taxpayers. Finch was in a Jacksonville hospital recovering from a stroke. They knew that. Special Agent Borghini's search warrant affidavit indicated that Bay County was more corrupt than New Jersey and New Orleans. Quote, this is what the FBI said to the judge. Derwin White and GAC made millions of dollars in fees from operations of sites, while Bay County and other municipalities paid an artificial disposal rate that had not been properly bid out, Borghini wrote. Even though the cat was out of the bag, the search warrant affidavit was sealed again 5 days later. Well, you can read it tonight because I linked it. How about that? Remember the treasure trove of evidence seized from JC contractors 5 days after Derwin died? Well, a year and a half later, at the evidentiary hearing in December 2022, Margo and Finch demanded to examine for evidence that they needed. Prosecutors didn't want them poking around, though, because they said it could ruin their ongoing investigation. Judge Walker asked why investigators hadn't chased down other illegal deals outside of Lynn Haven yet. Judge Walker asked, is there any doubt there's bad actors robbing the county blind? Is that in dispute? Federal prosecutor Andrew Grogan replied, I think there's a lot of corruption there, Your Honor. The judge was surprised that the feds put corruption in boxes for so long with no further action. The evidence had been compartmentalized with pieces stored in Pensacola, Panama City, and Tallahassee. The judge said that's not how investigations work. As the second evidentiary hearing came to a close in mid-December, Finch's attorney again requested that the case be thrown out. The judge directed him to file a brief outlining the defendant's list of bad actors and bad acts, along with sanctions and remedies based on case law. In other words, the judge said, okay, there's a lot going on here. What I'm going to need from you is file a brief, tell me who the bad actors are, what they did, and based on case law, how can I dismiss this? 2 days before Christmas, 2022, the list included the following names. Assistant U.S. Attorney Stephen Coons, FBI Special Agent Lawrence Borghini, Bay County Sheriff's Office Major Jimmy Stanford, Lynn Haven Police Chief Ricky Ramey, former Lynn Haven City Manager Michael White, Lynn Haven City Manager Vicki Gaynor. Well, once they got their names submitted to the court, the lead prosecutor promptly retired, Stephen Coons. Before Judge Walker could issue a ruling, Coons had a history of being sanctioned by higher courts for malicious prosecution. The 5th District Court of Appeals once compared Coons, the way he treats a grand jury, to giving a small boy a loaded pistol. Special Agent Larry Borghini had retired mid-case the year before. They punched out. Finch's defense attorney, Guy Lewis, outlined multiple flawed indictments, Sixth Amendment violations, and other reckless misconduct from the bad actors. The entire case has to be thrown out, he argued. Judge Walker would issue a ruling sometime after the holidays. It was Margo's 3rd Christmas since being indicted on 64 counts of public corruption. Prosecutors had superseded the indictment 4 times in their relentless onslaught of accusations. Her nerves were shot. Her face in the courtroom was frozen in fear and disbelief. Now I understand why people describe that look as being petrified. This was the first day I had ever met Finch. I apologized for jumping to conclusions when he was indicted the year before, but he wasn't familiar with my show and said it was nice to meet me. On the first business day of 2023, Judge Walker issued a decision on the bad actor list. He ruled that any misconduct by investigators and prosecutors was limited. At most, it was just limited. He decided that cross-examination during trial was the best remedy for any prosecutorial misconduct in the case. Did you catch that? Just limited misconduct. Y'all still could spend the rest of your lives in prison. This surprised me, since he had already rebuked them for being haphazard and reckless. In July 2022, Judge Walker warned prosecutors that they were approaching a threshold beyond which defendants are so prejudiced by the government misconduct that this court will have no choice but to dismiss the indictment. All right, I'm wrapping this up now. This is my prologue to the incredible best-selling book, Hurricane Michael, Storm of Corruption by Mayor Margot Anderson. So the whole prologue was how I went from believing she was guilty to knowing she didn't do any of it. Until Margot challenged me to look closely at the allegations in March 2021, I thought she and Finch had to be guilty of some of those 79 federal charges against them. She said I was wrong about her and that I needed to dig deeper if I really wanted to find the truth. The only way to get there was to follow the evidence with curiosity and humility. Did you hear that? Listen, that is the key. That is the key for an investigator or an investigative journalist or anybody. If you really want to get to the truth, what do you have to do? Follow the evidence with curiosity and humility. I might have been wrong. Why is it so hard for people to say that? Margot had seen me cover several high-profile cases over the years, but nothing compared to hers. Now, I've seen how the deck is stacked against people charged with federal crimes after being indicted by a grand jury. The Constitution provides the grand jury to shield against oppressive prosecution, but over time, it has developed into a rubber stamp formality for the government. No judges, no attorneys are allowed in the grand jury hearing, only the accusers, and it's done in secret. There's no accountability for false or malicious allegations. Fewer than 1% of defendants ever know what testimony convinced a grand jury to indict them. How can innocent people even begin to mount a defense without that starting point? Defendants are deprived of basic fairness and due process when evidence is kept secret. The identity of the grand jury must remain anonymous, but the transcripts need to be released. It should be the most pressing legal reform in the federal justice system. Until this happens, there's no deterrent against haphazard, reckless, or malicious prosecution. So Margot's book takes you on a journey of legal treachery that will shock the conscience of every American. And through it all, and I talked to her through it all. Behind the scenes, talk to her. Poking around, trying to find out what she may not be telling the truth about. And then once I found out she was telling the truth, the conversations got even deeper. Through it all, she personifies the faith and strength of Genesis 50:20. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about a day like this to save many people. And I link to that, to the book. Again, this is where you can find it, that whole article, bernie.substack.com. You do not have to be a subscriber to read it, but you can subscribe to get the weekly newsletters and other things that I write as well. I need to break out of here. Thank you to the Unknown Patriot for your support. And thank you to all of you who throw a tip in the tip jar at patreon.com/Bernie Thompson. As little as $5 a month, the best $5 a month you can spend on the internet. And you know this, man. It's easy and anonymous, and you can quit at any time. All right. I guess one more thing I should do. I'm wearing the same shirt again. Look at that. I am so behind. Listen, I'm going to tell you right now. I have 19 calls that I've missed, 54 text messages that I've missed, and 61 signals that I've missed. I am behind. So I've made a way for you to get my undivided attention No matter how busy I am, I've got to do it because I get paid. All right. So you can book a call with me and get my undivided attention for a half hour or an hour at calendly.com right there /Bernie Thompson. It is super easy to do. And I apologize. I know that I owe so many of you a phone call back. I am sorry. Please forgive me. But that's about the best I can do. All right. I got to get out of here. Thank you for being with me, and I will see you soon.